Welcome in, Campo and Joe, post-Super Bowl, which I think is kind of sad when you think about it because this is officially the offseason. But with new beginnings here in Duval, it's a great opportunity for us to talk about all that. Joe C. from XL Primetime, our head coach, Dave Campo, as we're ready to crank it out. A little Campo and Joe offseason is going to be an examination on both the offensive and defensive side, special teams, with Heath Farwell coming back, and then just kind of looking to see where they're going to go direction-wise in free agency. But I thought, Coach, we would start with the Super Bowl because we thought the Kansas City Chiefs were unbeatable. And guess what? They got the hell beat out of them. Unbelievable Super Bowl. What did you think of the Super Bowl as we start this conversation?
Well, first of all, I loved Philly's defense because, being a defensive coach, obviously, what they did was miraculous. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy for Vic Fangio because the guy's been a career assistant and a head coach.
Yeah.
But this was his first Super Bowl opportunity. And to call a game in a Super Bowl, which I was fortunate enough to win one, it's a good feeling, especially when you put in a lot of your life in that area. The thing that, was surprising to me is that, Kansas City had no answer for a four-man rush. I mean, their front four from Philly just dominated the game, and you kept thinking, okay, Andy's going to pull something out here and do something, or they're going to get zeroed down and we're going to bull up and stop these guys, and they never really did. Mahomes was under pressure the whole time.
Right.
And to be honest with you, he was the first one to say after the game that, he made some stupid decisions that put them behind the eight ball on some bad throws. But there was a lot of, once he figured out that he was having a hard time being able to just sit there. Mm-hmm. And, the great thing about rushing four guys, which Philly did the whole game, is you can do whatever you want in the secondary. It reminded me of the old Cowboys when I was there. Yeah. We were doubling up guys and doing a whole bunch of stuff because we were getting there with our front.
All right, so just think about it from a strategy point of view, because this is kind of dream scenario here in Duval. This is what you would like to see happen. Imagine just rushing four, having Josh Hines, Allen, Trayvon Walker, Eric Armstead if he truly intends and they truly do make sure he plays inside, and then whoever else it is. You need to have some guys that are savages, the way they play, and their talent level needs to be way up from where it is right now here in Duval. Because, Coach, you look across that defensive front for the Philadelphia Eagles, my gosh, they were grown men attacking and wreaking havoc.
Yeah, and, the interesting thing is, and again, I reach back to the days when I was with the Jaguars here and our guys in Dallas. Our front four, there was some dogs in that group. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, even though Trayvon is a great athlete, Josh Allen is a great, athlete, I'm not sure we have the dogs. Like, for example, Sweat, the guy from he wasn't even one of the best guys. And yet after the game, he was burned up because he didn't get the MVP of the game. That was Charles Haley for us.
Yeah.
If he didn't get the recognition, he was burned up. Now, he was happy for the win and all that.
Sure, but it didn't mean he didn't want his own accolades.
Yeah, I'm just not sure we have the dogs up front that we need to where they're not going to allow anything bad to happen to them.
Yeah, I think that was the thing I came away with more than anything else, because we talked about this before. We pulled up the roster that the Philadelphia Eagles have on the defensive side the last time they were in the Super Bowl, and then this time they were in the Super Bowl. The only guys that were commonalities from last time they were in the Super Bowl to this year is Josh Sweat, Darius Slay, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson.
Right.
And so Sweat was a holdover. He's good. But then when you have Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis next to you, and then you have guys on the other side that are also coming and wreaking havoc, oh my gosh, you're going to look really good. And so I agree with you that there aren't the dogs that you need, or I like to call them big cats, but that mentality, that relentless pursuit, and that's never accepting failure. And so someone's also got to bake that into them from the coaching staff.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, obviously the guys, the way the coach approaches the game and all that kind of stuff is important. I thought Nielsen was going to be that kind of a guy, but his demeanor and everything rubbed a lot of people the wrong way in that locker room. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is correct. Not only do you have to have a good football team, but you have to have the relationship with the guys, and the guys have to take your personality on. Yeah. And I think, that group there, they were coming to play. And all they'd heard all year was that they weren't quite the same team as Kansas City. Yeah. And it showed. I mean, they were relentless at going after the quarterback.
And it's funny because I just want to stay on Vic Fangio for 1 second. Then I actually want to look at all the big coaching figures in this game, and then Howie Roseman. But Vic Fangio is that old school guy. Yeah. He's a guy, a little no nonsense and a little gruff. You don't know exactly how to greet him. He may not greet you back. Don't talk to him. That type of stuff. He and Steve Spagnuolo, hugely respected defensive minds. Vic Fangio just won out big time over one of the more respected offensive minds in Andy Reid. Right. And Steve Spagnuolo was kind of lost against Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, again, it comes down to the fronts. Mm-hmm. We say this so many times, but it's really the truth. I love Matt Hayes because Matt Hayes on the primetime show says all the time, protect the quarterback and affect the quarterback. Yeah. Well, the difference was Philadelphia affected the quarterback and they protected the quarterback. Yeah. Kansas City tried to affect the quarterback, but they didn't, and they didn't protect the quarterback. Yeah, so that game was won, in my opinion, with the idea that, hey, we're going to get those two things done, and I think they did a great job with it, for sure.
Yeah, the thing that I preach the most is that this team, the biggest problem was you couldn't get a 3rd and 1 and you couldn't stop a 3rd and 1. And I want to see the interior part of that defensive line come alive, going back to your days with Big John Henderson and Marcus Stroud.
Correct.
Just how dominant they were interiorly here in the teal and black. And this team hasn't had anything even come close to that. If you go back over time, man alive, there are a few here and there guys that were good, but nothing that you could plug and play for years. And like we just said, Josh Sweat having Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis next to him, just think of the massive humanity and the willpower and just sheer strength. So then you go to the other side, and Kansas City, who had been able to kind of Band-Aid it together on that offensive line and use the Mahomes magic to get them out of any jam, suddenly they were extremely suspect at blocking and protecting.
Yeah, and the thing
couldn't run the ball.
Yeah, and the ththing that showed up to me more than anything else is that the two tackles were outmatched. I mean, Jawan Taylor and the left tackle, I mean, they were getting pushed back into the quarterback. But what you just said about the interior guys, they have a Pro Bowl left guard. Yeah. He looked bad in the game. I mean, those interior pass rushers that you're talking about got after him. Well, you put that combination together, you got a problem.
See, what was so bad is that they drafted a guy, and I'm trying to remember which guy. He may have been out of the Pac-12. Bottom line is they tried 2 guys at the left tackle spot over the course of the year. It did not work. They moved Joe Tooney, the Pro Bowler you're talking about, out to tackle because they had no other choice. That left a big gaping hole inside. So then they went and drafted, I want to say it was Mike Caliendo, I think was his first name, not to be confused with Frank Caliendo, the comedian impersonator. But Caliendo failed miserably. Yeah. And then you have Trey Smith, who did kind of get worked a little bit. He's a free agent, but he got worked. And then Creed Humphrey. It just – They were overwhelmed.
Absolutely, and to be honest with you, Mahomes had no chance. I mean, he was upset that he made some bad decisions, but somewhere along the line, he had to try to do something. They tried to get him on the perimeter, and that's when he made a couple bad throws.
Yeah, tell me if this crossed your mind at any point, because I got on the show on Monday and I said, basically, this is hey Pat. This is what Trevor's been dealing with.
Yeah,
this is what it feels like.
I listened to the show.
Yeah. And this is what it feels like to not have a dang bit of time to make a decision.
Yeah, you could tell from the beginning in the game that his feet were moving.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing with Trevor. If you don't feel comfortable that those guys are taking care of you, you look at the other side. Hurts sat back there and he could have eaten lunch and whatever before he threw the ball.
Yeah.
It was just a completely opposite game on both sides of the ball, to be honest with you.
So the other coordinators we were talking about, I feel like we kind of hit it, but Andy Reid's got to be coming away from this going, what the hell happened? I've been lauded for you give me 2 weeks to prepare. I'm going to come up with it with anything and everything. I guess the basic message back to Duval is that you think there's an unbeatable, invincible figure standing at the top of the AFC, and it's not.
Yeah.
They're not.
Right.
And this team, I don't know how quickly they can get to that level, but they're the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, has that window started to close just a little bit, or can they obviously do some things in the offseason to make sure they get back to where they were?
Well, it just depends if they can do that. I mean, the longer it goes,
mm-hmm.
the more you start losing players here and there. Well, do you replace them with the same or better product,
mm-hmm.
Who you have coming in? That's why they say there are windows, because once you start winning, now all of a sudden all those guys think, okay, I'm worth more money.
Right.
I'm going to free agency, and now all of a sudden they're headed in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the great thing about the Kansas City Chiefs, you can say whatever you want. They just didn't do very well in that game. But overall, to do what they did, I think, what is it, 4 out of the last 6 Super Bowls they
mm-hmm.
were in it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so there's no question that they're doing the right things with keeping it going. But there comes a time when they run out of people,
right.
and Travis Kelce. I mean, is he going to come back? They let some of their receivers go. That's something that they had to make a decision based on money.
Well, you figure he's 36 years old, I want to say.
Yep.
And Rashee Rice got into legal trouble and then ultimately was not going to be available for the rest of the year through injury or investigation. The NFL decided not to do anything before the start of the season. Then he gets hurt, and so he was gone. And then Marquise Brown was hurt. Hollywood got hurt here in Jacksonville in the preseason, and he barely came back towards the end. Who was it? Sky Moore. You can go down the line. There just weren't enough of those good players. So suspect play on the offensive line, lack of playmakers in the receiving game. They couldn't run the football.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard some of these things before here in Jacksonville? And that's kind of what they were looking at.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And that's why, in my opinion, they have to shore up the fronts here
mm-hmm.
to make sure that that's taken care of and everything else will take care of itself.
All right. Now, do you know, we're just going to hit a few of these guys as far as the coaching staff that was filled out. We'll be hearing from coordinators tomorrow. You can expect it on our social channels. There'll be plenty coming out once the coordinators speak. But when you think of the overall staff, the last couple of guys that came in, Coach, the offensive line, which I thought was kind of interesting, one of the guys that we were waiting to see what would happen. We know that we have youth in a lot of areas on this football team. But they ultimately go with Sean Sarrett at the offensive line position. A, do you know anything about him? And B, do you think that's going to be one of the key hires to make sure that they come in here and start to build back a front that can block and protect?
Well, first of all, I don't know that much about him.
Yeah.
I really have to do a little bit more research on
mm-hmm.
it. But it is one of the key hires. We've already talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that – the one thing about Sarrett, he's been in the league for 14 years. So, I mean, this is not they talk about young. He may be young, but he's not experienced. He is experienced.
Right.
And I think that bodes well. I think coming from that same tree, we've talked about that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He did a pretty good job with that offensive line in Minnesota. So, and he was the offensive line coach for the Steelers.
Yeah.
So he knows how to run the football.
That's good. You're right, Coach. That's good stock. That's good experience. They had good run game behind that Vikings front. They traded for Cam Robinson when they had injury, so he certainly saw a little bit of what Jacksonville had when he went up there. But if you think about that offense, it was able to protect Sam Darnold for the most part. He had his best year until the last couple of games that he played. Aaron Jones, I just love that guy. He's just undersized, low to the ground.
Right.
1,100 yards rushing. Right. I just love watching that guy. And they were able to kind of piecemeal a couple of other guys behind there. So you're right. Pittsburgh and Minnesota, that's two good stops for him.
Absolutely. So, I'm hopeful that obviously we don't know. I mean, any of these coaches, and the one thing, I've listened enough to Cohen at this point.
Right.
He's saying all the right things. I mean, we're going to find out, but he's saying all the right things about how he developed his philosophy about, having guys that are great teachers but great people and relate to the people in the locker room, all those kind of things. Those are things that you have to have in order to be successful. And I'm overly optimistic all the time, but I'm going to tell you this. I like the energy that the group that he's brought in here has, and we'll see about the teaching part of it as we go forward.
One thing about Campo and Joe, we don't go down the negative lane too often.
Yeah.
I want to see, I hope for good, I expect good. When I don't see it, then that's when we'll start to throw darts. But for the most part, offseason is supposed to be full of hope, and we can't help but be excited. We don't know what's going to come of this. Campanile, extremely inexperienced. Udinski, young guy. A lot of guys either came from the college, not either, but the college ranks, and then inexperienced guys that are taking over coordinator positions. Doesn't mean it can't work.
Well, all I can tell you is when you're coaching in college, if you're any good, you're doing a heck of a lot of teaching.
Yeah.
That's bottom line. Now, the guys that he's brought in are not just college guys. They're guys that had a college background and been in the pros. Now, they haven't been in the pros for 15, 20 years, but they've been in the NFL for long enough to where they've been successful. The guys that he brought in here are guys that have come from successful situations where they've had to coach it up. And, so you can only look at it and say, hey, at the highest part of it is that the energy is going to be back in the locker room.
Yeah.
Now, teaching, relationships, all those kind of things, you hope that the guys brought in the right guys. And that's all you can do at this point.
And I don't want to just keep kicking them as they're heading out the door, but the previous coaching staff, it didn't seem like there was a lot of on-the-field instruction that translated into good playmakers on the football field. They may have been lax at times. They may have said, hey, we're giving you all the tools to be successful. It's up to you to be. I don't know. It just looked like they were not prepared on the football field game day.
Yeah. Here's my feeling. I just heard, and I'm getting a little old now. You understand that. I can't even remember where I heard this, but I just heard this a few weeks ago.
Hey, I do that all the time, Coach.
From somebody out there that I had a podcast or I was looking at something, and they went through a period of 4 or 5 years about, and I think it might have even been basketball, where they looked back and what they did 5 years before, then 4 years before, then 3, 2, 1.
Right.
And they said the thing that stuck out more than anything else was they did less work on fundamentals at year number 1 than they did back at year number 5 when they were really successful.
Yeah.
So even though they've cut back all of these times and all that kind of stuff, it's not about schemes. It's about the guys on the field.
Yeah.
And the game of football is still blocking, tackling, fundamentals.
Yeah.
And so somehow, if you get the right teachers in there, if they coach fundamentals, we're going to be a better football team, period, because I didn't see it with this group that was here.
I agree. And I do think attention to detail, easily said, harder to do. You need to insist on it, demand it. And sometimes it can be a player like, my God, Coach, you're going to ask me to do this again.
Yeah.
And then they start to tune it out. There's a fine line.
The fun thing about it is, and this is why I'm optimistic, because sometimes when you are too experienced, it's all about the scheme.
Yeah.
These guys are all about what they just learned as young players, or as young coaches.
Right.
So now what you're going to get out of these guys, when I came into the league, I didn't worry too much about what we were doing. I made darn sure that we knew what we were doing, period. So, I looked at Green Bay's defense a lot over the last 2 weeks.
Right.
Since Campanelli has been here. Very fundamentally sound, good tacklers, and not doing a lot of different things. They got some good principles that they're changing up some things. It's not like they're just vanilla.
Right.
But at the same time, they're doing a lot of stuff over and over and over again. And I heard him speak the other day, Campanelli, about your eyes are number one. Number two are your hands. Talk about the linebackers.
Yep.
Number three, if your eyes are good and your hands are good, it's almost like martial arts. If you do those two things, you're going to be around the football and make some things happen. That's it.
You got to be really fast.
Fundamentals.
I do like it because he and Anthony Perkins, two of the guys that are coming here under Jeff Hafley's staff, and Jeff Hafley comes from Boston College into the NFL, that they're, to Coach's point earlier, there's a lot of people that have worked with young people, and they have to figure out the best way to communicate, to unlock whatever it is inside that player's mind, to just get it and then play free. In other words, learn everything, but act on instinct.
Right.
All those things. And so I love the idea of that. And then you do have some older, more experienced guys. Heck, Edgar Bennett. I'm stoked that Edgar Bennett is coming back.
Yeah, been around a long time. Good player and been in the league a long time.
And he's one of Jacksonville's own. And he came up the same time Leroy Butler and some of these other stars were coming out, going to Tallahassee. And he was a running back, and he was a coach in the running game by trade, but then has spent a long time, here of note recently, wide receiver coach.
Right.
So if you can coach, you can coach, right?
Absolutely. Listen, I'm a firm believer in that. It really doesn't. If you're a coach and you can teach, you're going to tell me what I'm supposed to put in.
Right.
Now it's up to me to teach it to our producer, Jacob.
Okay. Pay attention, Jacob.
Right?
Yeah. Yoda.
I think he's called a producer. Is that what he's called?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
He's a producer. He makes us look good and sound
exactly.
good.
Look at that. See? He's behind the camera right there. So, in all honesty, it comes down to, can I teach what you want me as a head coach to do with a defensive back?
Yeah.
Can I teach it to the DB?
Yeah.
And it all comes down to that in my mind.
Yeah.
And really, in all honesty, if you're smart enough and you understand the time frame, you can get it done. That excuse about not having enough time to get it done is baloney as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and I also wonder, like, one side of the ball, I do think there's, like, Matt Patricia was a disaster from the defensive side of the football, coming over trying to coach Mac Jones and the offense up in New England. So there are some that this just did not work type of setup. But at the same time, Edgar Bennett has seen a ton of stuff on the offensive side.
Right.
And he's also, as what you just described, a coach to player type of personality.
Yes.
I'm gonna get out of you what I think you're capable of.
Exactly. That's it. And really, to be, it's the younger the guys are, the more energy. If they know what they're doing and they're teaching it, I'm all for it. I think that's going to help us overall.
All right. Let's just finish up with the GM search, and hopefully by next week when we do another Campo and Joe podcast, we're going to try and ramp things up and do a couple during the offseason weekly so you guys can get as much in your Jaguar world as possible. They have to get it done before the end of the month. The combine, the clock is ticking, and we know that they have to have a person in place. So now they're starting to put together the interviews, and they put it out there as far as the guys that either they have interviewed or will be interviewed. Josh Williams, one of the most recent guys that has been interviewed. player personnel up in Buffalo. Terrence Gray, I think, is definitely an intriguing figure. You can go to a few others. James Gladstone, coming out of L.A., director of scouting. You know a little bit about Chad Alexander, so hit on him right now as another guy that should be looked at and regarded as a capable candidate.
I know nobody's going to like this, but to be honest with you, I think Ethan Waugh is going to be in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
From what I know about him,
mm-hmm.
he's not Trent Baalke.
Mm-hmm.
He's a smart guy. He knows the personnel. I think he's going to be here in some capacity.
I wouldn't mind that at all.
And I'm just not sure, to appease the masses,
right.
Maybe they need to bring in a guy as the GM. But he's going to be here in some capacity, right. I believe.
I don't mind that at all, but I do feel like you need to hunt down success.
Right.
And Ethan Waugh, yes, he was under Trent Baalke. He was a subordinate of Trent Baalke.
Right.
So it's not like you can go up to Trent and say, Trent, you've lost your mind. You need to go here. Now, he may have challenged him, and he may not have won those battles.
Right.
And so we'll find out. But at the same time, if I'm looking at Josh Williams, 49ers, I'm looking at Gladstone, Rams, I'm looking at Chad with the Chargers, we're talking about teams that have had success in the personnel department.
Right, in the personnel areas.
Yeah.
And that's great. And I think, obviously, I don't think Ethan's going to be the GM.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing about it, though, is my thoughts on Trent Baalke.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Boselli said it perfectly
mm-hmm.
the other day. He said, I'm looking for a guy that it's not just all about him.
Good.
It's about us.
Yeah.
Okay? Ethan was that kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if you bring in the guy that's going to be the main guy, and he's had success and he's been around, Chad is the one I know the most, Chad
mm-hmm.
Alexander, because his dad was our receiver coach at Miami
mm-hmm.
and Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
I've known him since he was 6 years old.
Right.
He's smart. He's been around Ozzie Newsome
mm-hmm.
and the guys at Baltimore. He's been around Harbaugh. He knows what Harbaugh is looking for, and I think Harbaugh made a difference in what went on in well, obviously he did it at San Francisco, and what he's done with the Chargers.
Yeah.
So, those are the kind of guys they should be looking at, the guys that have that mentality and have been successful, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll see a different type of a guy listening to Boselli than what we had here.
Well, we'll find out. Terrence Gray scheduled to be interviewed today. Ian Cunningham, Valentine's Day. We'll see if they fall in love with him.
Right.
But there are plenty of those guys that are out there right now. But I do like the idea of Shad saying, you know what, if we're going to go young in this building with our coaching staff, primarily young, and a lot of inexperience, and we may go get an inexperienced GM. There's not a qualified GM that has served as a GM that's sitting out there right now. You might throw Rick Spielman or somebody out there, but anyway, that's not being talked about right now.
Right.
Make sure you do bring one more set of eyes in this building.
And the other thing is to remember Liam Cohen doesn't know the scouts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ethan Waugh
does, yeah.
Waugh does. Yeah. Ethan Waugh does. So this first year, I think that's going to be a big part of it. And Liam will make his own decisions. Whoever comes in as a GM will make his own decisions.
Right.
Boselli will be involved. I don't think he's going to be involved too much with players, but he's going to be involved with attitude and culture, which is all part of it. When you interview a guy, you want to know who he is, not just whether he's a good football player.
Yeah.
So I just think that this first year, they're going to bring somebody in that's got a little bit of experience.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be a collaborative operation.
Mm-hmm. I hope so. Here's to it, Coach. Let's just go ahead and bobble our way out of here.
Let's get this thing going.
Exactly. We need some dubs in Duval. We'd like to get that energy going again, that's for sure. All right, we appreciate you guys checking us out. Campo and Joe, you'll definitely be able to check out XL Primetime with both of us. Always appreciate you hanging out and talking Jaguar ball.